exposed to the world. Everybody knows that you have promised to deliver Lagos-Ibadan Express Road, for example. And therefore, it becomes that little bit more difficult for you to obtain the loan and walk away.
Something else with it.
It becomes a little bit difficult. Okay. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it becomes just a little bit more difficult than in the past, when nobody knew. It was between you and the lending institution. A state can just walk out of Nigeria, take a trip to Germany, sign $100 million loan, and come back, and nobody knows about it. So how do you demand accountability for a loan you didn't know anything about? That's changed. It's impossible for any lending institution to borrow money to any government entity in Nigeria without parliamentary approval. It's impossible.
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Nwani now. Mr. Nwani, I am just playing devil's advocate here. As masses, we hear about how much Nigeria makes from oil. We also hear how much of that money is stolen. So, the common man out there is a bit skeptical because he believes Nigeria has a lot of money, but Nigeria cannot manage its funds. And he's not happy that Nigeria is going to borrow huge sums of money, most of which he believes will be stolen, as happens in Nigeria. So the people are a bit, they're not happy with this loan. What would be your message to them? You know, we need to take this money, it's going to be well spent. What are you going to tell them?
Interestingly, I am representing the private sector in this panel. And it's important to, first of all, appreciate the points my honorable marshaled here. The truth is that Nigeria have made significant progress in our debt management process and borrowing. You click on the button at the DMO website, you'll be able to see how much Nigeria is owing today, who we are indebted to, and some intricacies of each of those
interest rates,
debt, and even interest rate. But before I continue, I want to put some statistics into perspectives. As at 30th September 2012, that is this year, Nigerian total debt, which is in domestic and external debt, is $45.9 billion US. In naira, that is about 7.1 trillion naira. The external debt stock is $6.2 billion US, while the domestic debt stock is about 39.5 billion US. Looking at some other statistics, the debt service for 2013, thank God that the budget is the 2013 budget is under consideration now. It's about 592 billion naira, and that is about 15%. That is about 15% of total revenue, estimated revenue in the budget. About 15.8% of total revenue. Total revenue is about 3.85 trillion. That is also about 38% of capital budget. Capital budget standing at 1.54 trillion. And to us in the public sector, these figures are worrisome. The relativeness of these figures are worrisome. If we're going to spend as much as 38% of the capital budget, which is supposed to impart on the people on debt service, is worrisome. And we look at the numbers again and find out that 85% of this debt service figure flows into domestic hands. Interestingly, what the Debt Management Office, Minister of Finance, and other pro-borrow stakeholders keep telling Nigeria is that Nigeria has one of the lowest debt to GDP ratio. Nigeria, the S&P rating, they are very positive, and we can go ahead and borrow. Today, the debt to GDP ratio, Nigeria, as at 30th September, as I quoted, is 19.9%, which is very low, lower than the global benchmark. But the world have started moving out from this academic benchmark to practical benchmark. It is about default. Can you pay what you are owing? Not the size of your GDP. And of course, Nigerian GDP today is about 225 to 230 billion US dollars. 45% or 40% of that is accounted by a sector called agric that is not revenue based. It's an activity based, which means that this sector doesn't have anything to contribute to pay back our debt. And we say, is it not better to first of all discount this type of sector from our GDP bucket or basket? And if you do that, you find out that our debt to GDP ratio today is about debt to GDP ratio, that GDP minus agri sector is about 35%. The ratio is going high. If you add a 9 billion naira, $9 billion, we're about borrowing. We're landing at 41% GDP, debt to GDP. These are the figures. Recurrent equivalence was very clear that it doesn't matter whether government is financing their spending through tax or borrow. What matters is what are we using this money for? And the moral side of it is, if you are borrowing to finance expenditure, lifestyle and consumption, current consumption, let the people that are going to enjoy this be the people that will pay your tax. If you are borrowing to finance infrastructure, power that my children will enjoy, let's borrow because they will, so that they will be part of the people that will pay.
Now, Mr. Wani, I beg your pardon. If we imported less, would that help our situation in any way? We import almost everything in Nigeria. If we developed our industries so that we had made in Nigeria stuff to buy and stopped importing, because every company you know now is from aiming and buying dollars to import.
Of course.
So our naira is more or less non-existent. Some rents in certain areas are now quoted to you in dollars.
Yes.
Everything is now dollarized.
My grandmother knows the answer to the question. Yes, the answer to the question is, I don't need analysis to say yes. We are already importing human being. We import everything imported. And if we don't import or reduce our import, of course, we will create employment locally. But I think the subject today is about debt. So there are some points I still want to bring out as a private sector person, so that I don't gloss
money. You won't borrow.
Exactly. I want to connect it. I want to connect it. The challenge from the private sector, my honorable, maybe you take these as some of the messages, and I'm with you the way you are trying to guide to make sure that we're borrowing right and spending right. Our worry is that the domestic borrowing is becoming too much, and government is heating up the rate market, the debt market at the local level, crowding out local investors, SMEs, and anybody that want to have access to local debt market. Because of the rate, you can't compete with government when it comes to the rates. In the 2013 budget, the expected domestic borrowing is 727 billion. That is just like 20 billion naira lower than the figure for 2012. And this is worrisome. And we're saying that if we must borrow, three things must happen. It has to be go through the process we just mentioned. The debt have to have a moratorium, zero interest. It has to be concessionary, as you said. That is one. And I think external borrowing makes far more sense than domestic borrowing at this time. It makes, because when you borrow externally, at least you don't crowd out the local investors again. The rate market will begin to moderate. That is, the interest rate will begin to moderate, and by then you are encouraging local production, you are encouraging enterprise, you are encouraging investment, you are encouraging production, and these are the ways we can encourage production and reduce importation, as you said, and create employment, and people will pay more tax, government will get some more revenue. So our advice to the stakeholders is look at domestic debt and the way we come to borrow domestically. It is affecting the private sector, it is affecting enterprise, and the rate market is becoming just too hot. If we are borrowing zero interest, 10 years more, these are good news, but let this money be project-tied. Seriously project-tied. We are taking $1 billion US. We are going to tie the east-west route. I've been hearing since I was born. and the board or something is monitoring that. Not the type of debt we paid in 2006 or so, about 36 billion US dollars with the forgiveness and the 12 we paid. I don't know what it was used for. I have been asking my father that what was this money used for, but I have to pay.
Your father doesn't.
I don't want my children to inherit this type of situation. Okay. Honorable.
Okay. I think let me quickly tell him how we got to that debt of 36 billion. What happened that in 1979, Nigeria borrowed few billions. We were invited to borrow. But the same 1979,
you were invited
to borrow because we were said that they told us, the West told us, by then we are not sophisticated as we are today, that we are such a rich country with oil endowment, why not you borrow to fix certain things? And our politicians saw reason, the Chagari and their group, they went to borrow. But it was a strategy to actually trap us into a debt trap. What happened that in 1979, Margaret Thatcher moved the LIBOR interest rate from 7% to 21%. And Paul Volcker, who was the Fed chairman, equally supported that. And what happened that we were asked to refinance upwards, which means the interest rate that was at 7% was moved to 20%. So quickly from 1980, when we had about $9 billion, to 1985, it became 19 billion. So we could not even borrow, we only servicing. And because default and this and that, by the time you know it, by 1990, the whole thing moved to 30 billion. You understand? It was a trap set for us, and we have learned from that.
And it's good to see the trap like you explained.
Yeah, no. So even in my recent article, I analyzed that. But you see, let's get to the issue of borrowing wisely and spending wisely. Let me tell you, ask a very sensitive question, and we try to dodge it. The two questions we ask: after giving the approval, who follows to make sure that there's no deviation? Do you understand? And the house doesn't have capacity because I'm a friend of the house. Maybe he doesn't know me, but when we finish, I will tell him who I know in the house and who I help in the house. Now, another thing I have been hammering on, and I'm hammering on this thing because I love this country. A child who is 1 year old cannot engage in marathon with somebody who is a pro. Do you understand what I mean? We joined WTO. You know what that means? Is that our economy was being linked up with the global economy. Which means anybody can come here and start dumping goods. What that means is that the pressure on us to provide the dollar equivalent to import all those things. The Lebanese are importing, bringing in, the Chinese are bringing in, the South Africans are bringing in. So there's pressure on the naira to provide the dollar equivalent. If not, that will be inflation. So what does the CBN does? CBN tried to mop more money in circulation so that to put pressure on the naira note to hit up. Now, what we need to do as a country, you see, in 1868, when Meiji of Japan started the Japanese Industrial Revolution, what he did, the people that designed Japanese economy didn't even know the meaning of economics. They didn't even know who was Adam Smith. But they sat down in a common sense approach and said, if we do this, we get that. So I don't know this so-called economic theories, because what we need to do is exit WTO. If we exit WTO and close our borders, you know what will happen? The Chinese will be forced to come and set up factories here. Because they discovered that 170 million consumers are here, and the only way to exploit the market is to put their products in their manufacturing processes in the country. So also, South Africans that are now using copyright to bring everything, including the toilet tissues and the fruit juice and the vegetables to Nigeria, they will not be making it in Nigeria. It's as simple as that. Now, as soon as we do that, also, remember the tax revenue that will come into the government in terms of tariff. We are losing. It's a lot of money. Then we pay as you go, and the VAT will increase because business activities are taking place. Now, there's no way we create jobs here when we already exporting jobs by importing. Because in 1863, Abraham Lincoln told the Americans, if we import what is made overseas, we only get the goods, but we lose the money and the jobs. But if we consume what is made in America, not only we get the goods, we get the money and we get the jobs.
Good point. Just before you continue, let's come back to the Honorable, because that's a very good point to raise. In terms of the loan we're taking, the points that's being raised around here has been the same that a lot of Nigerians are raising. One, we want to understand who is going to have this oversight function to ensure that government spends that money justifiably, equitably, and gets the goods that we expect to get out of it. And then two, when this oversight function is being exercised, will it be one that has authority behind it to ensure that they are tracked and they are forced to do what they're supposed to do?
Well, let me start from this question, and I'll try and address some of the issues that have been raised by my friends here. I want to refer you to the legislative agenda set by the 7th Assembly right at inception. The House of Reps has put a document together. It's our legislative agenda, and it contains the yardstick by which we want Nigerians to assess the parliament in 4 years. Part of our legislative agenda enjoins us to ensure that we use the power of oversight that we have on the appropriations that we do to ensure that we follow the money.
The legislative agenda, before you continue, where will Nigerians see it so that they can make you accountable for what
I'm sure it will be on the website of the National Assembly, the House of Reps.
All right.
I hope you can find it there.